If you're a regular follower of this channel, you might already recognize a couple of the creatures in this ranking, since I've analyzed them in depth in previous videos. In fact, it was during those deep dives that a question came to mind. Are there more movies or TV shows where the Tooth Fairy stops being a cheerful childhood symbol and instead becomes a terrifying source of horror inspiration? The answer wasn't just yes, it was genuinely surprising. I discovered several portrayals, some creative and deeply unsettling, others more cliché but still disturbing, and they all shared a common narrative thread, that haunting transformation of something once innocent and sweet into something monstrous and frightening. Because when we think of the Tooth Fairy, the first image that comes to mind is a magical figure who exchanges teeth for coins, an innocent gesture that forms part of many of our childhoods. But film and television have twisted that tradition into a nightmare. Behind that seemingly harmless image, there now lurk monstrous beings, deformed specters, and creatures with an insatiable hunger for teeth. That's why in this video, I present to you a ranking of the 7 scariest Tooth Fairy-inspired creatures to ever appear in film and television. Number 7. The creature from the Haunting of Helena. Kicking off this countdown in 7th place is one of the most tragic and disturbing versions of the Tooth Fairy, the spectral entity from the 2012 film The Haunting of Helena, also known as Fairy Tale. This ghostly figure feeds on both children's suffering and, of course, their teeth. It all begins when Sophia, a recently divorced mother, moves with her daughter Helena into an old apartment in Italy. What seems like a fresh start quickly becomes a nightmare when Helena loses her first tooth and unknowingly awakens something that had lain dormant for decades. From that moment on, Helena starts receiving mysterious antique coins under her pillow and becomes obsessed with collecting teeth. Not just her own, but those of her classmates, to offer to the entity that dwells inside her closet. What Sophia doesn't know is that this piece of furniture hides a horrific past. Decades earlier, during the Mussolini era, an army officer discovered that his wife was a cannibal who had eaten their own daughter. Enraged, he pulled out all of her teeth one by one and locked her alive inside the wardrobe, where she eventually died in complete darkness. Her mutilated, hate-filled spirit transformed into a vengeful ghost, now determined to reclaim what was taken from her. The creature has a ghostly presence, pale face, an empty mouth, and walks with strange, jerky movements, often accompanied by a swarm of flies. Though she doesn't physically manifest all the time, her influence is powerful. She appears in mirrors, haunts from the closet, and brutally kills anyone who stands between her and the teeth she craves. What makes this so-called fairy truly terrifying isn't just her macabre origin, but the way she manipulates an innocent child's mind to carry out her revenge. Helena doesn't just give her teeth, she becomes her accomplice, thinking she's feeding a magical being, when in truth she's strengthening a vengeful specter. Although the creature's design is simpler compared to others on this list, its tragic backstory and psychological manipulation, combined with its lethal potential, make it a chilling reinterpretation of the Tooth Fairy myth. One that doesn't come to reward you, but to take what she wants, even if that means ripping it straight out of your mouth. Number 6. The Tooth Fairy. In this spot, we find a lesser-known but undeniably brutal version of the Tooth Fairy, the creature from the 2006 film of the same name. Unlike other, more symbolic or ghostly incarnations, this Tooth Fairy is a physical, merciless killer driven by vengeance, with a legend that dates back to the 19th century. The story takes place in a quiet town where a young woman named Darcy and her family move into an old inn inherited from a distant relative. But their new home hides a dark past, because an entity known as the Tooth Fairy haunts the property and has begun killing once again. According to local legend, in 1859, a woman named Audrey Miller, a seemingly kind matron, had a bizarre obsession with teeth. She used her house as an illegal clinic where she offered treats and care to sick children, only to drug them, pull out their teeth one by one, and then murder them in cold blood. Once discovered, Audrey was executed, but her spirit never left the house, Since then, every time a child loses a tooth in that property, her ghost returns to complete her macabre collection. What makes this version of the Tooth Fairy so chilling is that she isn't a subtle or ethereal force. No. Despite being a ghost, she manifests in a very physical form, essentially becoming a slasher villain akin to Jason Voorhees. Only in the form of a decaying woman with gray skin, claw-like fingernails, and a grotesque grin that reveals empty gums and rotting teeth. Her face radiates madness and decay. She materializes in the darkness, crawls along walls, hides under beds, or appears behind her victims when they least expect it. In terms of abilities, this spirit doesn't just have supernatural strength. She also appears immune to conventional physical attacks, easily tearing through doors and barriers. She seems to have some control over darkness and can vanish and reappear at will, making her attacks unpredictable. Her connection to teeth is so strong and supernatural that she can detect the moment a child loses one, and that alone is enough to mark them as prey. But what truly makes her terrifying isn't just her strength or grotesque appearance, it's her relentlessness. She doesn't stop until she gets what she wants, and if anyone tries to protect her intended victim, they become a target too. Though The Tooth Fairy from 2006 is a modest production and received mixed reviews, its central creature left a lasting impression among B-horror fans. That said, the film suffered from poor acting performances that held it back from becoming a cult classic. Number 5. The Sugar Plum Fairy. The Cabin in the Woods. In 5th place, we find one of the shortest but most disturbing appearances of a Tooth Fairy-inspired monster. The Sugar Plum Fairy from The Cabin in the Woods, directed by Drew Goddard and written by Joss Whedon. Despite only appearing on screen for a few seconds, her visual and conceptual impact was strong enough to earn her a place on this list as one of the most unsettling parables of the Tooth Fairy myth. If you haven't seen it yet, The Cabin in the Woods is a film that cleverly plays with classic horror tropes. Its premise centers around a group of young adults who travel to a remote cabin in the woods, unaware that they are being manipulated by a secret organization that must sacrifice 5 people using archetypal monsters, all to appease the ancient gods. In an iconic climactic scene, the containment cells holding these monsters are opened, and dozens of creatures flood the facility. This is where we catch our first glimpse of the Sugar Plum Fairy. No explanation is given for her presence or origin. She's simply there. Her appearance is utterly terrifying. She looks like a normal little girl wearing a pink ballerina dress, her hair tied up like a child performer, exuding the innocence of a fairy tale character. But one horrifying detail breaks that illusion. Her entire face has been replaced by a giant, tooth-filled mouth. She has no eyes, no nose, no expression, only a gaping maw full of sharp teeth stretching across her face in a grotesque, unnatural smile. The contrast between her childlike appearance and monstrous deformity creates a deeply disturbing visual. Her abilities aren't fully shown, but based on the chaos around her, she appears to be incredibly fast, stealthy, and likely carnivorous. Like many other creatures in the facility, her purpose seems to be the brutal execution of anything in her path, likely through biting and devouring. But what makes her most disturbing isn't just how she looks or behaves. It's what she symbolizes: the corruption of innocence. She embodies the archetype of childhood, twisted by horror, a figure that shows how something pure and vulnerable can be transformed into something terrifying and monstrous. I included her in this ranking because despite her brief appearance, the Sugar Plum Fairy stands out due to her design and the discomfort she causes. And considering she's surrounded by a sea of monsters of all kinds, the fact that she still manages to leave an impression speaks volumes. Number 4. Eddie Painter, Channel Zero, Candle Cove. In 4th place, we find a concept of the Tooth Fairy never before seen on television. Eddie Painter, also known as the Tooth Child, from the first season of Channel Zero titled Candle Cove. This anthology horror series is inspired by creepypastas, and Candle Cove in particular adapts the story of a bizarre children's TV show that only certain people remember, and which appears to be linked to a string of child disappearances and murders in the 1980s. The story follows Mike Painter, a child psychologist who returns to his hometown after the mysterious disappearance of his twin brother, Eddie, during their childhood. As he digs deeper, he uncovers that everything is connected to the sinister TV show Candle Cove, and to a supernatural figure known as the Tooth Child. This creature, which appears intermittently throughout the series, is deeply disturbing and morbid. It has a humanoid, child-sized shape, but it lacks any skin. Instead, its entire body is covered with tightly packed teeth, some white, others yellowed, dirty, even rotten. The creature has no visible eyes or mouth, yet its presence alone evokes a sense of emptiness, as though it were a primitive, mute entity completely detached from any human emotion. Its appearances are always accompanied by a strange, oppressive atmosphere. It doesn't run, scream, or attack openly. It simply appears, often in dark corners or right behind people, and silently watches them. The Tooth Child usually reveals itself to children or emotionally vulnerable individuals, and its presence seems to cause memory loss, distorted judgment, or even hallucinations. Although the Tooth Child never kills directly on screen, it functions as a conduit for Eddie Painter, the real killer. In most cases, Eddie operates in spectral form, trapped in a realm beyond normal reality. The Tooth Child, then, is nothing more than a physical projection of his disturbed mind, a monstrous extension of his hatred. The terror it induces lies in its silence, in the inevitability of its appearance, and in the way it seeps into the minds of those who encounter it. It earned its place in this list because, much like the previous entry, in a series saturated with an incredibly sinister atmosphere, the Tooth Child manages to stand out as one of the most original and horrifying figures seen on modern television. Number 3. Matilda Dixon, Darkness Falls. In third place, we have one of the most iconic and terrifying interpretations of the Tooth Fairy myth in modern cinema. Matilda Dixon, from the 2003 film Darkness Falls. This entity isn't just a ghost. She's a living legend born from guilt, tragedy, and the thirst for vengeance. Matilda Dixon's story dates back to the 19th century, when she lived in the fishing town of Darkness Falls. She was a kind woman, beloved by children, to whom she gave candy and coins in exchange for their baby teeth. However, her life took a tragic turn after suffering an accident that left her face severely burned. She developed a condition that caused extreme pain when exposed to light. From then on, she could only leave her house at night, wearing a porcelain mask to hide her injuries, a fact that gave rise to fearful superstitions among the townsfolk. When 2 local children went missing, Matilda was unjustly accused. An angry mob dragged her from her home, beat her, and hanged her. The children were found safe shortly afterward, but by then it was too late. The town, realizing they had murdered an innocent woman, covered up the truth. Yet with her dying breath, Matilda swore revenge. Ever since, her cursed spirit has returned as a vengeful ghost, haunting any child who loses their last baby tooth, and killing without mercy anyone who dares look at her. Her appearance is terrifying, a floating specter shrouded in black garments, her face hidden behind a cracked white mask. Beneath the mask lies a burned, scarred visage, more demonic than human. Her presence is heralded by whispers, sudden movements in the dark, and a suffocating aura of dread. Though ethereal, her form is tangible and lethal. Among her abilities are levitation, supernatural speed, and the power to stalk victims in total darkness. She's practically immune to conventional physical harm. Her only weakness is light, which she fears and avoids as it causes her pain. This vulnerability, tied directly to her suffering in life, makes light the only effective defense against her. What makes Matilda Dixon so terrifying isn't just her appearance or her powers. It's the tragic origin of her existence. She's a victim turned executioner, a historic injustice incarnated in ghostly form. Her story serves as a chilling cautionary tale about collective ignorance, fear, and the destructive power of superstition. Number 2, the Tooth Fairies, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. In second place, we find a group of creatures that redefine the term Tooth Fairy forever. Though their screen time is relatively brief, these beings left a lasting impression thanks to their dual-natured design and ravenous behavior. These fairies are anything but sweet. They're introduced as part of an underground monster market, and when they're released from their cage as a kind of biological weapon during a black market auction, all hell breaks loose. These are reimagined folklore creatures, turned into insatiable predators, capable of devouring human bodies in mere minutes, bones included. Visually, they are tiny, no more than 15 centimeters tall. But that doesn't make them any less terrifying. They have membranous wings that resemble wilted leaves, skeletal-looking, slender bodies, and a bulbous, onion-like head with large black eyes. But the most disturbing part of their design is their mouth, a circular structure packed with flat teeth, resembling a mix between human and beaver dentition, specifically designed to consume hard substances like bones and teeth, since their diet is primarily calcium-based. Though small, they act in swarms like flying piranhas. They also reproduce quickly and are extremely fast and agile in flight. Guillermo del Toro presents them as a metaphor for the broken balance between the magical and human worlds, creatures displaced from their realm who now attack indiscriminately. In Hellboy 2, even the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense team is taken aback by how lethal they are. Professor Krauss warns that the swarm could consume the entire population of New York within just a few hours if they aren't stopped. Number 1. The Homunculi. Don't be afraid of the dark. At the very top of this list are the most terrifying creatures to ever take on the title of Tooth Fairies, ones I recently explored in a dedicated video. I'm talking about the Homunculi from Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, the 2010 film produced by Guillermo del Toro. These entities are not just horrifying in origin and behavior, but also in their grotesque appearance and how they hunt and interact with their victims. The film, based on the 1973 cult TV movie, tells the story of a young girl named Sally who moves into an old mansion with her father and his new girlfriend. There, they accidentally unleash a horde of small creatures that had been sealed away beneath the fireplace. These fairies, or more accurately, homunculi, are described by Guillermo del Toro as malicious, shadowy beings, creatures of folklore evolved from ancient myths who have lived hidden among humanity for centuries. Banished to the depths of the earth, they still search for victims, especially children, whose teeth they crave. Visually, these creatures are small, measuring about 20 to 30 centimeters, but they're incredibly intelligent and highly organized. They have hunched, deformed bodies, sagging, wrinkled skin, worn-down teeth, and milky, opaque eyes. They move in coordinated groups to hunt and are extremely nimble, scurrying through vents, wall cavities, and dark corners. Despite their numbers, each one has a uniquely grotesque appearance, which makes them more realistic, and reinforces the horrifying idea that they not only steal their victims' teeth, but transform them into more of their own kind. The homunculi communicate through whispering, can unlock doors, and manipulate human objects with ease. They are shockingly intelligent and strategic, capable of setting traps and psychologically manipulating humans to turn against one another. Because of this, I believe the homunculi from Don't Be Afraid of the Dark are the most terrifying tooth fairies on this list, not only because they seek victims to feed or take revenge, but because they aim to convert them, and they are cunning, cruel, and relentlessly malevolent. Throughout this ranking, we've seen how the Tooth Fairy, a figure many of us associate with childhood wonder, can become something truly horrifying when reinterpreted through the lens of horror cinema and television. From vengeful ghosts to flesh-hungry homunculi, these twisted versions prove that even the most innocent childhood tales can hide monstrous nightmares. But now I want to hear from you. Which of these dark reinterpretations of the Tooth Fairy did you find the most disturbing? Would you like to see a video exploring more fairy tale characters turned into horror creatures? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming content. See you in the next video. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed this video, I've got another one I think you'll love. Check it out.